Light zone is for immediate...
Wait a minute. Have you heard?
This is a show to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Citizens of America,
Welcome to the Radiocast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Radiocast, where the ECAT crew, we go a deep dive of the specials that we use for old-time movie and old-time TV. My name's Adam Carrero, and I am the host of this episode of Radiocast. And today I have Jack Kelleher with me, Joe Taff, and Joe Borman. So today's episode that we're doing, we did old-time movie. We did the Abraham Lincoln 1930 film. And for old-time TV, we did an episode of the Glass Key. So first, we'll just do a generic. How do you guys like both of them? Then we'll break it down for each one.
I like both these well enough, though. I definitely did have some of my critiques about each of them, but yeah, I like them. Yeah, I like them enough. I found the Abraham Lincoln movie to be interesting, and like also the Studio One episode Glass Key was kind of interesting to watch, especially since like I believe this is like the third episode. Well, like this is the third example of like a anthology episode that we've had on the old time TV. The other ones being Miracle on 31st Street and the Casino Royale episode. So it's kind of interesting to see like a third example of that style of TV.
Yeah, we're going down the anthology route. Personally, I thought they were both pretty decent. I saw the Glass Key first. Thought that was cool. It wasn't like outstanding or anything, but for the time, I thought it was pretty sound. And then Abraham Lincoln, I thought in the same vein, pretty good for the time. I mean, there's some stuff that I'll definitely get into from a technical aspect, but I think that they did a pretty good job with that. I enjoyed it for the most part. From what I like the beginning of the Lincoln movie a little bit better than the middle and the end. I think it dragged a little bit there during the war and stuff, but I don't know if you guys agree. But yeah, I'd say overall I thought they were both decent. I think I liked Abraham Lincoln a little bit more.
Well, absolutely agree on that. I'll get into it later, but the beginning scenes of Lincoln are my favorite of that. I enjoyed both. I feel like parts of Lincoln have aged better than others, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But Glass Key was pretty good. I don't really know the source material too well, the movie it was based on, so it was interesting seeing an adaptation of a movie like that where I don't know the source material prior.
Yeah, so it was a movie. It was also a book at first. It was a book by Dashiell Hammett, who is known for doing some different detective-y kind of novels. And what's interesting is The Glass Key was the first time that they decided that, or Hamill decided to, Dashiell Hammett? Hammett,
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Decided to make the hero, the detective, a little bit more, or a little bit less heroic, I guess you could say. More of a complex protagonist who he's not like now it's escaping me. Who was the who has all the facts?
The guy
Dragnet?
Dragnet.
Yeah, what's his name?
Was it Dragnet?
Yeah.
Dragnet.
What was the detective?
Joe Friday.
Joe Friday. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. He's not.
I don't know who you're looking for.
Yeah. I'm sorry. No, I know that detective, Joe Friday. Like, you know, he's like your standard good guy, traditional. Like, he's gonna get the bad guy, and in a way, like Ned Beaumont did get the bad guy, but along the way made some enemies as well. So I think that was pretty interesting. It just gave a different perspective, and I think they did a pretty decent job. I think that's the thing that, in my opinion, they did the best at in this adaptation of The Glass Key, was just making it feel like, man, this guy he's not really like a good guy, a traditional good guy that you would expect to be rooting for, because you're rooting for him, but at the same rate, you're like, oh man, you really had to like go ahead and steal that dude's girl. You know?
Yeah, because he's not he's not like a detective like Joe Friday is. Essentially, he's a criminal. He's the advisor to a mob boss, and it is interesting that is the main character of the story. And yeah. And then I was looking at the source material. I have not seen the previous adaptations of The Glass Key. It was first a novel in 1931, and then it was made into 2 film adaptations prior to this episode, one in 1935 and then in 1942. But while I was watching it, I was surprised to notice a lot of similarities between this and, I don't know if anyone else has seen the Coen brothers movie. It's called A Miller's Crossing. It came out in 1991. It is it's like a crime film, and it shares a lot of similarities between this and The Glass Key. And I looked it up, and yeah, the original source material of the book was an inspiration for that film because it shares a lot of the same plot points. The main character is like the advisor to a mob boss who's in love with this woman whose brother is causing him trouble. There's a rival gangster who's trying to win the Ned advisor character over, and it's just
trying to win the gang war.
Yeah, like it's just interesting. I was watching the episode, I was like, wait, this is Miller's Crossing.
Yeah, I didn't like it was a crime film, but I didn't like watching it. I was like, you don't get that gangster feeling. You still like, kind of feel like it's a cops and robbers, even though he's not a cop, but it's still that like
murder mystery.
Murder mystery, and the confrontation is like more like bad and good cops and robbers kind of feel than like really shady gangster kind of movie.
I think that the O'Rourke character was the most gangster crime boss character that you have in the movie, but he's not in it a whole lot. A lot of the time it's Ned and Paul talking in a room together and kind of disagreeing on things, and also Ned talking to Janet, and just a lot of it, like you said, it's not really gangster based, even though it has elements. But I think the cool, like, maybe they should have dipped into that a little bit more. I mean, it's based off a book, but
so they could have gone like the shady government person. What was his official title he was running?
The senator.
That's what it was.
The senator.
Yeah.
And the I'm trying to think of what Paul's actual like. Was he like running for mayor?
That part was a little confusing to me at first, but what I believe was happening was he was kind of like Paul, who's a mob boss, and like he was like backing the senator's election. Yeah, he was trying to get into politics, and he's basically kind of being the big money backer for the senator.
Right.
And his rival, Shadow Roy, was kind of like trying to. I think they mentioned at one point he was like backing another candidate. So it's kind of like these two gangsters who are kind of trying to increase their power by like getting involved in politics.
Yeah. I was having trouble keeping up with all that. I won't lie. I went to the Wikipedia page at least like 3 times while watching this.
There are a lot of moving pieces, you know what I'm saying? Like, cause you have these gangsters, but they're backing these politicians, and they don't go from a gangster angle, like you said. It's like more of a feeling of political rivalry and support and stuff like that. So I think it was an interesting way of going about it. But personally, my favorite part was when Ned was captured by the O'Rourke gang and he jumped out the window. I don't know if you guys agree, I thought that was awesome. He like crashed through the window. That was like the one shot that like probably cost them any money.
I have some things to say about that shot because I will say earlier I mentioned watched like other anthology shows, Climax in the 20th Century Fox Hour, where we watched Casino Royale and Miracle on 31st Street. And I will say out of all of them, I think this one maybe had the poorest in terms of production value, because when Ned jumped out of the window, the actor drops like a foot, lands on the ground, then runs off screen.
Yeah.
Like there's a very obvious mistake. There's a blooper.
Gotcha.
Obviously there on screen because Ned jumps out the window. You see the actor drops like a few inches. He quickly tries to run off screen. The other 2 people run up to the window and look down as if he
It
just
was a big jump.
It was a big jump.
They're like, I can't make it.
And then it just
Take the stairs, boys.
And then it just hard cuts to Ned lying face down on the ground as if he actually jumped out of a
Like
window.
that big wide shot, right?
Yeah, but in reality, we saw the actor jump through
Fall
the
and
fake
run.
window, land on like the stage in front of it, and then he tried to like make up for it and run off camera before anyone noticed. But but it was very obvious.
They couldn't break the window again. You know?
Yeah.
So they had to go with what they had.
Yeah, and not only that, like, granted, they could have built a set to be high enough, but you think they'd just throw like a crash pad or like something that he just literally just jumps on and lands.
Yeah, or even just find a way to manipulate with the camera, right? I mean, when you gotta hide stuff, you gotta find a way to do it in camera instead of being like, here it is.
Yeah.
And if you can't fix it with a cut, then you gotta do it somehow with the
And not shoot it so much.
framing.
Yeah, framing it so not so much.
Like, it was
directional.
cool. I liked how he jumped out and it made this big crash, but then like you said, it's just he's there, and then when they cut out, he's like it's a big wide shot like from above. That, I mean, I guess you're assuming that he jumped out of the building that's like on the left side of the frame, but definitely a bit of a blunder, continuity blunder.
Yeah, and I think
1949.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, because keep in mind, this was made in 1949. Like, they probably did not have a lot of resources and like time or budget,
Especially
like to
time.
do reshoots and stuff. And
to do reshoots.
and I know we mentioned earlier how there was a bit. All of us seem to have a little confusion with like who was running for office. I think that is kind of one of the critiques I mentioned at the beginning, and it kind of just goes with this sort of like taking a movie and novel, condensing it down to like an hour-long episode. Is that the story is going to be? Are you going to have to try and fit a lot into a short time span? Because they had to take this story that was like an hour. I mean, take this story that was like made into a novel and 2 previous movies and try and condense it all into like less than 60 minutes. So that is going to lead to like a lot of like a rushed dialogue and like exposition.
Yeah, even the story that they were trying to come up to talk to the police, it was just like, we're just gonna tell them this, and like, not much detective work to make holes in that.
No, they were like, they bought it.
Yeah.
They're like, sounds good. Where'd they go? Which way? Which direction?
Yeah. We weren't there.
I agree. yeah. We'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
We don't have cameras, so. I think that another thing that they did pretty well, at least from what, I don't know, I haven't seen any of their adaptations, and I know that's not helpful when it comes to comparing, but I liked how the Paul and Ned kind of friendship, partnership falls apart in a way that feels honest and true to the story, like because of this girl Janet, because Paul is in love with her, she doesn't really like him, and then Ned meets her, and he doesn't really want to engage in any kind of romantic activities with her to begin with, but then eventually he gives in to his temptations as his relationship with Paul gets worse. And even though like Paul didn't do it, Paul didn't kill the guy, they still fall out. And of course because Paul's backing the senator, right? Or at least he's backing. Yeah,
but Paul was basically the guy who was funding his campaign, I believe.
Right. So the guy he was funding eventually was the one who committed the murder, but Paul didn't commit the murder, and Ned still stole his girl.
Yeah, I believe Paul helped to cover it up.
Yeah. No, sounds about right. But he was able to. Yeah, it's one of those like. You have built-in deniability. It's like, well, I didn't do it, so I have no idea who could have done it, even though he knows exactly who it is. But yeah, I just thought narratively they did a pretty all right job with having that. I mean, I guess they weren't necessarily best friends at the beginning of the movie or anything, but you see how far it goes in that direction.
Yeah. From having seen this, I kind of want to see the original movie version.
True.
I really think an extra half hour Like, let's say the movie's an hour and a half, that would really let the plot breathe a bit. It was just too condensed, but the parts are there.
Yeah, the parts are definitely there. I think because I was having that while I was watching the episode, I was thinking because like the murder that happens is like the senator's son, who is the brother of Janet, and the first time we see him in the episode is Ned finding his dead body, and I just thought to myself, I was like, in the movie adaptations, we probably met him before this. This probably is. Probably in the story, there was supposed to be a scene of us meeting him before. Then same thing with the senator. We don't meet the senator until the end of the episode. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, in the original story, we're probably supposed to meet him a lot earlier than this.
Yeah, it does kind of feel, when you look at it from a 1,000-foot view, like it kind of lessens the climax, the impact of the climax of the film and the resolution when the guy who committed the crime, we as an audience don't really know who he is, or like we know who he is, but we haven't met him. And so if it was Paul or if it was O'Rory, you'd be at the point where you're like, oh, like this feels a little bit more conclusive, a little bit more satisfactory. But when it's just the senator who, you know, like you said, we just met, it's a little bit less enjoyable.
Yeah, and something that I thought about is that, yeah, I've mentioned a few of the other anthology shows we've watched where people took like novels and movies and adapted them into like hour-long episodes. I know there seems to be like a big trend in old television, but it's not something we see done nowadays. There are definitely anthology shows like Black Mirror and shows like that, but we don't really see this kind of TV anymore nowadays, where they like take movies and TV or novels and adapt them to TV.
Yeah, they usually would just make it straight to even a full-length series or movie.
Yeah.
Like there's some series that just seasons, but not like Black Mirror and...
I was thinking American Horror Story too, a little bit.
They do a whole season.
They'll do a whole season, and they come back for season 2, and like all those actors will be playing different characters. Roles. So that is a little. It's all different, you know what I mean? But like you said, what they did back then, they don't do anymore.
No. Like
I was just curious as to why that's kind of no longer done. Maybe it's just kind of like not as popular. People felt like, hey, now we have the resource. Well, maybe back then it was a matter of like, hey, people are already familiar. Like, hey, these are novels and movies that I've already made. People are familiar with them, so we don't need to like tell all the story points or do like these big productions because people are already familiar enough with the story. So we can get away with telling a more condensed version versus as TV went on, the quality increased and people were like, no, like we can make bigger productions and make original content.
I don't know if it's just like the characters, not the characters, like the actors. Like if they have actors starting doing different roles, if people could still in their minds to be like, that all I can see that person is
Joe
this
Friday.
role. Yeah, Joe Friday. Like even though he's doing something else, but no, that's Joe Friday.
Yeah.
It's almost like for a little while, Chris Evans like came back at it.
Just
Started off
Captain
at Captain. Now he's just Captain America. But before when he started, it was like, yeah, he's the Torch.
Yeah, right.
This.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, like you didn't like you brought up American
Typecasting.
Horror Movie. Like not too many people had the issue of that, but they. I only watched like the beginning season, so they didn't do it as much as they did at the end. But if you really looked into the background of that series, they were doing the whole series about the seven deadly sins. So each season was a deadly sin. So it was its own story.
It had a little bit of an overarching thing. It wasn't like they were just season 2 is something completely different. Like they had thematic similarities.
Yeah, like I haven't seen True Detective on HBO because they were kind of doing that. Like it was still
season 1 a little bit.
Yeah, it was still a detective series, but each season was a different detective story. So, but they didn't use the same actors. It was totally different actors.
Yeah, that is a bit of an anthology in a way. You know, like it's more of, I guess not really, but it's interesting. I think I just want to get back to your point about why they don't do it the way they used to do it, like by adapting movies. I feel like and I could be wrong, I think it probably has something to do with copyright, where a lot of movies, when they come out, or books, right? When a book does well nowadays, studios will buy the movie rights immediately just in case they might get a hit out of it. Like they'll pay however much, even if a movie never comes out. So it's like a studio can't just adapt the newest fling book that just came out because some studio probably already bought it and plans to make like a big movie out of it, or at least might, like they have it in the dockets. And a lot of the times, of course, it doesn't happen. But yeah, like copyright rules and stuff, like back in the day might have been a little bit looser than they are now, where you really have to, like when you think about what could be adapted now, like, I mean, you see like people do new, like you see people doing new like Wizard of Oz content, like new adaptations and takes on the story, like, but you don't really see bigger studios like Westinghouse at the time, like, and I know they were starting out, they ended up becoming pretty big, but you don't see studios taking classic stories and just one-to-one adapting it for their audience. So maybe that's something to do with copyright.
Yeah, that's kind of the theories I've had with this, because I'm thinking, one, back then it must have been much harder to get a movie on television, so it was probably easier for them, like, okay, we'll pay some actors and we'll reenact it, have it be an hour compilation story. There we go.
Call it a day, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And the other thing I'm thinking is the corporate sponsorship of it is rapidly changed. You don't see, like, one company, like, McDonald's doesn't have like a half-hour TV show on. They'll just run a 30-second ad between a show.
Yeah.
True.
Speaking of advertisements.
My favorite part.
Yeah. The Westinghouse infomercials in the middle of the program. We made jokes about it during our old time intro, and I just thought they were so funny. I thought it was so funny, just the fact that they were trying to sell this washing machine, and the person who we made a little joke about it in ours as well. The woman was like, "No bending at the waist and hurting your back," as she's literally like hunched over getting the clothes.
Yeah, they
showed like a pile of laundry detergent. They're like, "This is how much a regular washer uses," and then it just like shrinks down like a tiny bit. And like, "This is how much ours uses." It was very funny.
Yeah, they really didn't know how to sell the new crazed technology products back in the day. Like I was just watching, it was the 1923 during that time era, they were coming out. So they were like walking down the street, and outside they had a salesperson who was like, "Oh yeah, this is a washing machine." Mm-hmm. A washing machine? What does that do?
What is this contraption?
Yeah. This is a refrigerator, an ice box. It keeps things cold. Yeah. And like the sales was just trying to do the same thing. It's like, well, you get your clothes and you just put them in, close the lid, and the machine moves it.
That's why
it's just like it moves it.
And it spins.
Yeah.
That's why they had to buy on proof, because they didn't believe it. They're like, "Yeah, you're pulling my leg. This is a scam."
Yeah.
And so they're like, "Buy on proof. We'll come and wash your clothes for you and show you how it works." It was like an infomercial plus like they're going to educate you while they literally sell you the product. It's pretty bizarre. They don't do it like that anymore. Now they would say buy on credit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Not even buying credit. They just show the ad and people just go crazy over the ad and just get the product. And then it's just like, oh, there's these kind of issues.
I guess, I wonder if people just were more skeptical back then of what they saw on TV, because the fact that, I mean, the lady on the infomercial showed how to use the washing machine. And then they cut to the guy saying, "If you don't believe her, then I'll come and do it for you." So did they just believe that their audience wasn't buying it? They're like, "Yeah, I don't know if I can trust this lady."
I don't know if it was just so much of a bigger gap with technology, and now we've jumped so much in technology so many times. Now it's like, no, it can happen. Look at the car and look at this and look at now. There's more examples, so it's easier when like jumps up like now with like the Apple goggles. It's like, how can you put something in your eyes and still walk around? True.
Yeah. Back then they've been like, what is this madness? Yeah. I think too, like, we're so exposed to technology, as you said, like we're used to, we don't have to, it's exactly what you said. We are so inundated with televisions and seeing things on TV. Like the relationship has been breached, where back in the day the TV was like make-believe world, like that, like nothing, like it's not real. But then like now, like we know that it is. It's just filmed through a digital lens and the way that it is. So definitely a much different world back then. But yeah, I thought those infomercials were hilarious. I had to talk about them a little bit.
Yeah. And something for like a company really to like, listen, we can get more money if we advertise what we have.
Right. Yeah.
And like just think of an avenue instead of being like, oh yeah, we'll make money people watching or go to the movies. It's just like, no, if we show our items, people go buy them then.
That's a great point. I didn't think of that because, you know, it wasn't like they wanted to put more money into the production. They were like, oh, we can sell our washing machine. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also probably like corporate sponsorships, like, hey, like help sponsor our show and we'll have an ad for your product.
That's probably what it led into.
Yeah. But that's probably what they were hoping for, but they didn't have any sponsors, so they just used their own washing machine because it was a Westinghouse washing machine. Yeah. Well, so they just didn't have any buyers yet. It was very early on in the studio's life.
I don't think Westinghouse was the studio. Westinghouse Electric Corporation was the sponsor. The studio was a CBS, actually.
Oh, that aired it. Yeah.
Yeah, that aired Studio One. Westinghouse was like the sponsorship, so that's why they slapped the name on everything.
Yeah, but they could have spent the money for that 1 hour spot, and then in that 1 hour it's like, we'll just make something and then we'll throw our stuff in. Like I just saw this video just pop up. So when Star Wars got released in
77,
maybe Chile.
Oh, 2003. Yes,
2003.
I know the story.
It was another country. This beer company filmed a shot of the scene and put it in the movie, and they showcase it. That like, one was when Obi-Wan is trying to get the power down off of the Death Star, and he's on that tower and shimmies. He has a door open, and in the movie, the door opens and he hits buttons. But they cut it that the door opens and there's the beer. And a hand comes in, and it's the jingle of the beer.
Cerveza Cristal.
Yeah.
These are amazing.
But but it's like back like doing that with Westinghouse and that. It's like, instead of going to commercial, we'll just cut it and just show our product and go back to the movie. But it probably led into be like, oh, now we can show like other companies will pay into it. But yeah, I just saw that the other day. I was like, oh, that's amazing.
That's wild. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Speaking of movies, should we start talking about Abraham Lincoln now?
Yeah. So Abraham Lincoln, with a history that people probably know the outcome of it. But I think like
I don't.
This was definitely. If you watched the intro of the movie, yes,
yeah,
Joey
you would know that I am uninformed.
I don't know if this was the first movie about a president, but I know this was the first big time, and I got transferred into color. Like I feel like there probably was movies about the British War with George Washington, but I don't think there was really like a somewhat of a biopic. But this one was off of a biographical novel too, and it got made into a movie. But it definitely got made into a movie, but it's another concept, just like the Glass Key. It took so much information and just jam-packed everything.
Yeah, that was kind of my critique of the film. It's the pacing, where kind of the first third about Abe Lincoln's early life, it sort of takes its time.
Right.
But kind of as he gets older, we kind of basically get the bullet points of his life, whereas like
the cliff notes.
Yeah, whereas like he meets Mary Todd. Now he's engaged to Mary Todd.
Right.
He's leaving her at the altar. Now they're back together. Now he's running for office. Now he's lost that election. Now he's offered to become president. Now he's president. Now the Civil War has started.
Yeah.
It just kind of jumps from point to
Flying,
point.
you know, yeah. Like they only had an hour and a half, so they definitely, the scene would fade to black, and you don't know where you're gonna end up on the other side of it.
Right, and they started like combining like events like together too, and like if you knew the history, you'd be like, that happened later, like the Secret Service with him, but Secret Service was made because he got assassinated.
Right.
But somehow he's in this movie.
Yeah, and also,
Yeah.
I did notice some historical events taken out of order because, speaking of historical inaccuracies, the film, when it depicts the bombing of Fort Sumter, shows it happening the opposite, where it shows the fort actually firing on Charlestown, where in reality it was Charleston, the Confederates there firing on the fort. So the film kind of does depict the Union as starting the war instead of the Confederates, and I have a theory as to why, but I'll get to that later. But I didn't, and then you see the troops all getting together, and then there's a cabinet meeting where one of the people's like, Mr. President, the people are worried. We need a victory. And then after that, they're talking about a battle happening at Bull Run. And Bull Run was actually the first battle of the Civil War. But where it's placed in the movie makes it seem like
it's not the first.
A few battles have already happened.
Right.
But it was the first battle. And actually how it's depicted, or more so how it's communicated, because it's just Abraham Lincoln and his Secretary of War getting telegrams describing the battle. Actually, those telegrams are pretty accurate, because in real life, the Union was winning the battle, and it seemed like they were going to win and the entire war would be over with the first battle. But then at the last second, the Confederates turned the tide and won. So yeah, the movie was accurate with how it described how that battle went down. So I did enjoy that part. But the way it just kind of dropped the Battle of Bull Run in this odd place, I was like, wait, this was the first battle. It seems like we're well into the war at this point.
Yeah, I wonder what the reason for that was.
I don't know if it was more of a time constraint.
Yeah.
Because they didn't granted he was involved with a lot more stuff, but they really didn't do a lot of they kind of did the Fifth Amendment, but they didn't really go into slavery and
they showed the debates between him and Douglas,
right,
in the in the middle third of it. But
and even then, people point out that in the movie they kind of show. Well, again, we kind of just get a bit of bullet points with the debates, where the film depicts them more as discussing the issues of states seceding from the Union. In reality, they were talking more about slavery.
That was the reason that they would be seceding. So
they didn't really go in a lot with the railroad, how he helped that, basically going through.
They didn't have any time for that.
No time.
If they weren't talking about slavery, they weren't talking about the railroad.
Right.
This is definitely the Spark Notes version of Lincoln's life.
100%.
Yeah, and that kind of was a critique I had, is that I watched this whole movie about Abraham Lincoln, but at the end of the movie, I kind of felt like I didn't really know a whole lot about him by the end, because, again, he talks about how he wants to free the slaves, but the film never really explains why he wants to do that. What's his personal feelings? How did he come to feel this way? And also, he says the words, the Union must be preserved, 10, 12, 20 times throughout that movie.
Said it right into the lens.
I got so sick of him saying that. He just kept saying it over and over, the Union must be preserved. But he never explains why he feels that way, where that philosophy comes from. And maybe it was just the film's a pacing where we kind of just jump from one moment to another. But to me, at least the film never really told me who Lincoln was as a person.
Right.
No, you just saw him age very rapidly. From the beginning of the movies, fighting guys outside the bar or the soda shop, and
and that actually
the whole group in.
And that actually was an accurate detail. When he was a young man, Lincoln was known for being a very good wrestler.
Yeah,
so that part was accurate.
Just throwing that guy around. I thought that was a really fun scene. Obviously, I mean, I definitely didn't expect, as I started watching that movie, for there to be some hand-to-hand combat going on in the first like 5-10 minutes.
And the dramatic change of some of the guys too. At first, they're like, you got nothing. You know?
Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, this
Hey,
guy's great.
Yeah, 100%. I loved also the guy with the straw in his mouth, like the limp straw. And then it was basically one of those guys that was like giving him crap. Man, that was funny as heck. Also, I was gonna say I did learn one thing about Abraham Lincoln in this movie. That he could do a reverse keg stand.
Oh, that was
That's
fantastic.
all I can call it, is a reverse keg stand. Like, that was so funny when he just is like, well, if I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna do it this way, and you guys gotta do it too. And he gets on the ground on his back, rolls it up his shins, and just like rips the beer. I thought that was so funny, man.
I wanted more young Lincoln. That part was pretty fun.
I think it started out. I think the beginning was the best. Like, you get a lot of the character, if any, that the movie had, the character development was in the beginning. I think that it, like you said, the character motives of why he wanted to preserve the Union were a little weak, and I think that they were kind of leaning on like his humble beginnings, but they didn't really show him interacting with very many people other than Anne. But I do believe that they did. I think that the actor, what's his name there?
His name's
I got it.
Walter Houston.
Houston, yeah. I think he did a really good job, especially in the beginning, like when Anne was sick. He made some facial expressions that were just really like distraught and believable. He felt like he carried the weight of, and throughout the whole movie, carried the weight of Lincoln's presidency and like how much was on his shoulders during that time. I thought that was really effective. But again, like the pacing was so fast that it went from like him being tutored by Anne to proposing to Anne to Anne dying in 3 scenes.
Yeah, and I might as well touch upon this now because I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole when it came to Anne, is that there's a lot of historical debate whether or not the two of them were ever like in a romance or if they were just friends, where after Lincoln died, a friend of Lincoln's who really hated Mary Todd Lincoln started telling everyone like, oh no, Anne was his one true love, not Mary. And it's very debated over whether or not this romance actually happened or not. So I fell down a whole rabbit hole about that, of just historians discussing it.
That's bizarre. I wish I fell down that rabbit hole. Kind of jealous.
Yeah, and also speaking of Walter Houston, who I do believe he did do a really good job in this movie. Well, he was no Daniel Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln, but he did do a good job.
Tough to pull off.
But you mentioned him as younger Lincoln. Something that I did find funny was the makeup they put on him for young Lincoln, because Walter Houston was 47 when they made this movie. And
aging him down was a little tough.
Yeah, the makeup for him, when they're trying to make him a young man, he kind of looked like the Joker to me.
Yeah, I thought so too. He looked like the OG Cesar Romero Joker a little bit, like a full-on clown. It's funny, especially in the colored version that's up on our channel. It's like he looks like kind of the makeup is more enunciated, I guess you could say, like more prominent. Like you can see, like it almost looks like lipstick on him.
And I wonder if when they were writing like the script for this, if they wanted to, because this is like very early, like now there's been so many Abe Lincoln movies that if someone came out, it's like, no, this is a movie just about
Vampire Slayer.
Well, just as beginnings and not do anything about the presidency. I think people would still see it because they've done enough movies as that, but this came out so early that there was nothing like that. So it'd be like, no, we got to add it. People want it. This is why people are coming to see it.
That would be probably a pretty good movie if you think about it, like in today's standards. If somebody made a movie just about kind of young Lincoln and his rise and like how he went from being like this farm boy, rail setter to a prominent politician. I mean, you could probably make a pretty solid movie out of that.
Yeah, because even the Spielberg Lincoln movie I just mentioned only focuses on one particular aspect of Lincoln's life, which is him trying to get the amendment that freed the slaves passed.
Only that aspect of it,
Yeah, and that film itself was based on a book called Team of Rivals, which spans Lincoln's entire life, and but for the film it only adapts like
those chapters.
like a very small part of the story because
Yeah.
there is just like a lot of Lincoln's story to tell, and I will say this film does very ambitiously try to tell as much of it as it does,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like it maybe kind of bites off more than it can chew, and
Most likely. But I think that for an hour and a half, they did cram a lot of stuff. And whether you see that as good or bad, I can understand. Probably more so negative. But at the same time, like, if you imagine them having like another hour, I feel like they probably could have made it feel a little bit more just cohesive and better paced, you know? Like, I know they didn't really make movies quite that long back in the day. I mean, for 1930, though, like, when we talked about the Glass Key and say, oh, it's 1949, but like 1930 was a long time ago, and they were making silent films majority and like up until then, like, so
yeah, this film actually was the director's first sound film he ever made.
and I mean, it was very early on in the world of sound films, so there are times where the audio is not great. There's sometimes where you hear some characters louder than other characters, which is interesting. But at the same time, I really thought that there was some awesome camera work. Like, they were moving the camera around. Like it felt like it wasn't just like panning and tilting. It was like sliding. Like the shot early on when they show, like, you know, the very first shot of the movie when they have like the forest and it's like, you know, windy and stuff, like that's moving across, but then, which is probably what, like a painted backdrop or something. I don't even actually know, because the trees
It was
were
probably a
moving and stuff,
miniature.
so. Yeah. But like even that, like, you know, the camera's moving across, and then it did that too when his mother was pregnant and like having like in labor, the camera like moved across the cabin and showed like as the lady opened the door. So there were some shots that I really liked. I liked when Lincoln was hammering the nail before he starts talking to Anne. It was like, you know, kind of like close in on the nail as he's hammering it, and then it pulls out and you get like Anne and you see him, he starts talking to her and stuff. And the other shot that I want to mention was when he's walking down the stairs with his sons. I thought it was a really nice shot. It's like he was lit, like backlit nicely, and he starts out where you can see him, but then as he gets down the stairs, he's like much more of a silhouette. And I just thought that was a really cool shot for, again, 1930. Pretty effective cinematography.
Yeah, the director of this film, D.W. Griffith, was known for like innovating a lot of film techniques, like moving cameras, and he actually made a lot of Civil War movies, silent films before this. So he was kind of known for making a lot of some of the first like big battle scenes. And now that I mentioned D.W. Griffith, I might want to mention. Earlier, I mentioned I had a theory about why this film seemed to kind of shy away from some of the slavery aspects. Is that D.W. Griffith is known mostly nowadays for his film Birth of a Nation, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of, it's considered one of the most controversial films ever made.
Yeah,
where
that's him. Wow.
Where it's about Reconstruction after the Civil War, where the Ku Klux Klan are the good guys and the freed slaves are the bad guys.
What?
And the film is kind of considered responsible for basically reviving the Ku Klux Klan in America. So, yeah.
It is like John Wilkes Booth was the good guy.
Yeah, so I was watching this film and noticing how they kind of seem to shy away from discussing slavery a bit. I was like, I wonder what. Like, okay, Griffith, I see what you're doing.
Show the Union ripping shots. But I thought it was funny too, because you mentioned that, like, it shows from the perspective the cannons of the Fort Sumter, like, ripping shots toward what would you say, Charleston?
Yeah.
But then up on screen it was like Confederate shot first, like started the war in text, right? Like a title. So I was like, okay, like, well, what do you really want me to? They're like, make your own assumption about what truly happened, right? So yeah, that's definitely interesting though. I did not know that he directed that movie, and that makes this a much more interesting situation.
Yeah, now that you mentioned John Wilkes Booth, he just kind of gets away with it at the end. Like, they don't show him getting captured, anything. He just kind of runs off, and then we get the Lincoln Memorial ending.
Yeah, they cut it pretty quick. There wasn't much of a conclusion there or a wrap up.
No, just a wrap up on Abraham Lincoln's life.
Right. Yeah, exactly. His life's over, the movie's over, right?
And speaking of Birth of a Nation, that film also depicts Abraham Lincoln's assassination. It's kind of what the film opens up with.
Really?
And
wow.
I kind of feel like he actually films the assassination better in Birth of a Nation than he does in the Lincoln film, because in the Lincoln film, like, there's a wide shot of Booth entering the balcony in the background, kind of cuts to a close-up of Lincoln, you hear a gunshot, and he just falls forward.
Oh, that was the weakest death.
Where in Birth of a Nation, like, it's all one shot. Like, it's just kind of a wide shot of the balcony. Like, you see Booth enter, walks behind Lincoln, raises the gun. Because it's a silent film, there's just like a puff of smoke, and then Lincoln falls forward. But it's just kind of interesting watching. I was like, I kind of feel like they filmed this better in the silent version.
That's pretty interesting. It's like they probably had less means of doing it, with Birth of a Nation. So, like, he was like, we got to simplify. And sometimes simple can be more effective. Like, while with the Abraham Lincoln movie, they were probably like, oh, like, we can take more time, we can get more shots, we can do this and that. But it was like the close-up shot of Houston, like, being shot. I know we said he put in a good performance, he did, but that was that was a little questionable. That was a little weak.
Yeah, I was like, they definitely could have done another few takes of that.
Right. I was like, they might be running out of film at this point.
Well, yeah, because Houston would go on to win an Oscar late in his career, so it probably maybe that just wasn't wasn't the right take.
Right. It was like I don't know. It was a bizarre take. But overall, I think that it was a good performance out of him, in my opinion.
Yeah, he was a believable Lincoln.
I agree. He looked really good when he had, like, the beard and stuff we were mentioning before the movie. Like, in the beginning, he looked a little weird, but I think he still gave a strong performance. And, I've already talked about these things. But then, like, later on, the beard comes in and the hair's a little bit more outgrown. And he's an older actor, so not older, but older than they were portraying him at the beginning of the movie. So once he kind of, the ages line up between Lincoln and Houston, it becomes a little bit more natural.
Yeah, I did agree with that. Like, once he gets the beard and the hat, like, he kind of becomes a lot more, like, a believable as Lincoln versus when he's like this obviously old man trying to act like a young kid.
Hello, fellow kids.
How do you do, fellow children?
Yeah, right.
But it definitely gave at that time, definitely a different look at of Abraham Lincoln's that you didn't really get to see in a lot of movies at that time for a biographical movie.
Yeah, if you were alive at the time, you only hear what you hear on, like, the news, like, what they didn't have TVs, but like, what you hear about the president, like,
the books and that. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. While versus, like, seeing a film and kind of getting most of the whole picture in a quick hour and 30, it was probably pretty big deal at the time when it came out.
Yeah, and also, speaking of when it came out, a fun fact is that when the film came out, there were still soldiers who had fought in the Civil War who were still alive. There were veterans who were still alive, and this was the first sound movie to ever depict the Civil War. So it's the first time Civil War veterans saw a film depicting the war in sound. So that in itself was kind of like a historical first.
That was probably scary.
And I believe there were probably just like short silent films about presidents from the past, but I wonder if I need to look it up. This might have been like the first presidential biography in sound, so it might be.
I believe it.
Yeah. It's because it was the only, I think Anne Rutledge, I think it was only her like second role, and it was sound. So this was definitely a time period that it started transitioning from still picture to sound.
Yeah, because as I said, this was Griffith's first sound film, and then he only made one other sound film after this, and then he retired because I guess he just didn't enjoy making sound films.
He's like, dang, I gotta do audio too. This is such a pain.
Yeah, I know, like, there were like a whole lot of actors and directors who, when film transitioned from silent to sound, they just, like, their careers were over because they just didn't because they were either so used to doing it they didn't want to do it, or
Yeah.
it just didn't work for them. And
That's actually really interesting.
also something that I kind of noticed about like the making this film is that I saw it was distributed by a United Artists, and just seeing the title kind of brought me back to a film class I took in college, because United Artists was like the first big independent film company, where it was founded by Griffith, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks, who were all actors at the time, and they got sick of having to deal with all the studio nonsense. So they were like, hey, let's just make our own company and make our own
Screw
movies.
them.
And
I love that.
and I believe this was one of their first sound films. So like when I saw the United Artists logo, I was like, oh, that's cool that it was made by them.
Yeah, I did see that logo. That's cool. You know, you gotta love when people stand up to the big bad studios who want to take away from creativity and stuff, because you have so many instances of directors and writers and people just having to can't think of the word, but just give up their creative choices and stuff. So yeah, when they came together, like, you know what, man, we're just gonna make movies on our own, you know, like screw them. I think that's awesome. And yeah, Charlie Chaplin, I mean, I'm sure that we'll probably be getting into some of his stuff pretty soon.
Yeah, he's got a lot. Yeah, that's a good example of someone I just mentioned who he didn't carry over to the sound era. He tried to fight. I know, like, he tried to like fight it as much as possible, and when sound took over, that's where his career kind of floundered, I believe. And yeah, there are a lot of Charlie Chaplin films in the public domain.
Definitely. I mean, it's almost 100 years, you know, 100 years now. Once you get to that point, that's public domain, right?
I believe it's
unless you
75.
keep renewing
Like
the copyright.
100 might be for books. I might be mistaken, though. I don't have the stats in front of me here.
See.
It might be 75.
Yeah, because Abraham Lincoln went to public domain because they didn't want to renew the license. So if the company still wants to keep renewing it,
Maybe it's just
kinda went through
with
it.
like pictures, because when I think it might be pictures that's 100, but maybe I'm mistaken. And like, you know, using them without having to credit anybody.
Gotcha.
I think it's 100, but I'm not a lawyer. So. I don't know.
I know they've changed the law a few times with it, so like there's differentiating expiration dates. So I think in the future it's going to be like when the artist died plus 80 years after that.
Yeah, and it's different in every country too.
Right.
Like, every other country uses different copyright laws. That's why a lot of stuff will get struck in Russia. You know, our Russian demographic isn't pulling through because our
and that's
movies won't
why
show
the Star
over there.
Wars it worked in
Yep.
Chile
Yeah.
with that commercial.
True. True.
Different.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
was it this movie or Glass Key that got blocked in Russia? Because I know we saw like on
Yeah,
YouTube
one
there's a
of them.
notification. It was like,
That's right.
hey, copyright.
Yeah.
Like, hey, copyright is not showing in Russia.
These territories. Yeah.
I think it was Glass Key. We're very sorry to our Russian audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
A lot of us stuff doesn't get through in Russia.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah. What can you say?
Well, I'd like to thank both Joe and Jack.
No problem.
And hope you guys like this episode of Radiocast, and hope you guys watch the old time movie and old time TV edition that connected this. But keep a lookout for other old time movie and TV shows coming out that we'll be doing in the next coming months, and new episodes of Radiocast.
That's right.
And if you're just coming on to this now and want to see our old episodes, you can go to ECAT's YouTube page, Easton Cat TV, with TV being the capital letters, and look up the playlist and watch some old episodes. So make sure you like and subscribe ECAT on all the platforms so you know what's coming out and when we're starting to do some new stuff. And join us next time on Radiocast.
That's right. Thank you, guys.